What up? What it is? What's popping? It's the neighborhood nice guy KDot, aka Professor Dot, and welcome to a special edition of Jump Ball and Study Hall brought to you by the 9450. This is our brackets and buckets Final Four preview. And I am here with none other than my very, very special guest. We're celebrating 30 years of the 1994 National Championship North Carolina Tar Heels coach Sylvia Crawley Span. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, thank you, K Dot. I'm so honored to be here. First of all, I love the name Jump Ball and Study Hall. Like I love it. And yeah, 30 years just kind of it ages me a little bit, but the feelings are still the same. When I watched the NCAA tournament and I watched the confetti fall down from the ceiling and people cutting the nets, it's like I go right back to the day that it happened. So once you're a champion, you're always a and anything that you do, nobody could take that away from you. So it's a special time. Like March always means a lot to me.
Absolutely. And I want to go ahead and literally jump right into it because we have a lot to talk about this evening. I promise you, I'm not going to keep you long because I know you have a flight to catch in the morning. So while we're on that subject, let's talk about what you have going on this weekend in Cleveland for the Final Four.
Oh wow. We have our Wellness, Wealth and Winning conference. So first of all, I'm the CEO of an organization Tall Girls United. And it's for women 6 feet and up. And we just kind of have pulled together our tribe. We unite all tall girl organizations, all tall girl clothing brands. And then our mission is to mentor young girls who are often the tallest in their class, or in my case, tallest in their school. So I was 6 feet in the sixth grade with a size 12 men's shoe. So I felt very alone in my walk. And it wasn't until I got to college and I met other teammates who were also tall, which on a team, you figure there may be about two other people that are your a height or taller. And so, we don't want little girls to navigate through that alone, wondering if the boys are going to ask them to the prom, or people staring at them every day, people asking them if they play basketball, whether they do or not. So we want to mentor them, tell them, whisper in their ear, tell them stand strong, stand tall. Being tall is your secret sauce. God supersized us and you're beautiful and wonderfully, fearfully and wonderfully made, and so that's kind of our mission. There's a lot of tall girl organizations, a lot of brands out, which I'm very proud of. It used to be you had maybe one tall girl shop, if you had that. You either wore high water pants or you had a tall girl shop in your town. If you didn't live in a big city, you just had to be creative, learn how to sew or something like that. And so now we're having a fashion show on Saturday with all the tall girl brands. We've got TJL Collection, we got Prissy Ducks, Ninth Closet, Mole, and my line, Crawley's Creation. We have the first metaverse, first signed metaverse model. Her name is Posh. She's going to walk on a virtual runway. She can only wear digital clothing, and just so happens yours truly has an NFT dress that just dropped March 8th. So she's a digital dress, and she's the avatar of RJ White, who is the first, maybe the only Black female who owns a men's professional basketball team. She owns the Chicago Vipers. So she's going to walk on a physical runway while Posh is walking on the virtual runway. So we have LED furniture sponsored us, and we have a lit up runway. We have a jumbotron being made in Columbus, Ohio, and they're driving it to Cleveland on this weekend, and it's going to sit right in the middle of the runway because our theme is called the tip off. So we've got a first quarter designer, second quarter designer, halftime show, third and fourth quarter, and overtime. So do not want to miss this. We have some WNBA models who will hit the runway for the very first time, and we have a runway coach, hair stylist, makeup artist, the whole works. I jumped the gun a little bit. On Friday, we're having a brunch. It's called our Ultimate Brunch Forum because we have brunches all year long in different cities, but this is Ultimate Brunch. So we have how you have the TED Talk? We have a TGU Talk.
Nice.
by Yolanda Moore. She's a beast, as you know. She's gonna kill it. So she's only doing that for about 10-15 minutes, but she's gonna like punch you in the mouth for those 10-15 minutes. And then she becomes the moderator for our panel. So we've
Nice.
got
Nice.
Vicky Hall, who played for the Cleveland Rockers. We've got Tracy Henderson. I can't remember what her married name is, but back when she played, it was Tracy Henderson. She was a Cleveland Rocker. And then we've got Cleveland's finest, Samika Randall, who's from Cleveland. So it just made sense to put her on the panel. She's Cleveland, Ohio, right? So we've got just an all-star panel. We're super excited about that. And then we're sponsored by the Boys and Girls Club. So the brunch is located at the Boys and Girls Club of Cleveland on Broadway Street downtown. And after our brunch, the will be getting out of school around 1:30, 2 o'clock. So then we'll have breakout sessions in the wellness, wealth, and winning categories. And then we will mentor young kids right there at the brunch. So we're super excited about doing some community service, mentorship while we're having a brunch. The WNBA sponsored it, making the brunch free for all WNBA players to attend. So we're super excited about that. And then we cap it off on Sunday with the FCA worship service. So yeah, we'll be so tired by the time we get back on Monday. It will be crazy. So yeah, we had tons of sponsorship. We're a 501c3. So that helped us leverage some of the sponsorship, and people donated, and we got in-kind donations. And so we're able to do this in a really big way and yet mentor the young girls, which fulfills our mission.
Man, that is so amazing, Coach Crawley. And I am really, really excited for you. I'm excited for this weekend. I am excited for everything that's going to be happening around the Final Four and the national championship. So let's just talk a little bit of hoops. And you know how I get excited with hoops, and how you and I just continue to talk about the evolution of the game. And we're going to get right into it. Talk about the Final Four. So the first game that's going to be profiled on Friday is going to be South Carolina versus North Carolina State. Obviously, these two teams have had an incredible year, especially with South Carolina going undefeated thus far. And they have pretty much ran the entire gauntlet throughout the entire regular season and throughout the SEC tournament, coming into this tournament and making it to the Final Four. And then obviously you have NC State, a team that a lot of people didn't have pretty much competing this year. I think the ACC, they were supposed to finish 8th, and they came out the woodworks 14-0. And with the powerhouse in the backcourt of Isaiah James, Sanaya Rivers, and the freshman Zoe Brooks, along with Mimi Collins and River Baldwin, they have done such an incredible job all year long and have made their way to the Final Four. So let's just get right into it. So what are your very first thoughts about the styles of play for both of these teams, and where do you think that they kind of jump off on paper between the two styles?
I think they're similar styles, actually. And it's going to be an interesting match to me. Oh, shoot, my battery's running low. It's going to be an interesting matchup because you have Sanaya Rivers, who transferred from South Carolina. So they're going to have her scouting report for sure. She's going to want to have a breakout game for sure. So that's the player that you got to keep your eye on, because she can get hot, or she can feel a whole lot of pressure and want to play so well. You know, like sometimes as an athlete, you want to have a good game so bad that you just blow it. You know what I mean? Like you're just too anxious, too excited. So I'm hoping that she will be able to control the nerves, just stay grounded, focus on her defense, and play her game, not try to do too much, you know. But yeah, just similar, you know, they have athleticism, both teams. They both have a presence inside, you know. So it's going to be interesting. I do like that South Carolina has better outside shooting this year. I think that's one of the things that they got better at. But their freshman, she's cut differently, KDot. I love South Carolina's freshman. She is special. She really is. And we really had a good freshman class this year.
Absolutely.
I mean, I mean, they play like veterans with ice in their veins. I'm gonna charge up because at any minute my computer's going to blank out. So I'm going over
Nope.
here near the plug. But so yeah, I really like that matchup. I wish that they matched up a little bit. I wish that was like the final game. But there's so many good teams that could be the final game. You kind of want to see Iowa and South Carolina. I don't want to jump the gun with your show, but for those two matchups, I think they match up well. I predict. I mean, I'm an ACC person, so I would love for NC State to win, but I think Don's going to pull it out on that one.
Yeah, I agree with you. And just like how you talked about similar styles, and when we're talking about the similar styles, we mean in a sense where we have elite guards on both sides of the teams. We have South Carolina with the impeccable guard of Raymond Johnson, who I believe is one of the last of a dying breed, last of the Mohicans of what we call the traditional point guard, who knows how to get the ball into their bigs, especially with Camilla and with Ashlyn Watkins. She does such a great job navigating their offense, playing inside out. And then you have the sharpshooter in Tahina Pow. And then you also have a great 3-and-D player in Bree Hall. And that's going to be an amazing matchup, seeing Bree Hall and Sanaya Rivers match up against each other. If she gets that matchup, I believe she might get the Isaiah James matchup, but we'll see how that comes. But also on the North Carolina State side, again, with those guards and Sanaya Rivers, Isaiah James, and Zoe Brooks, who, again, as a freshman, has done an incredible job. And we haven't even talked about the other freshman, Tessa Johnson, on the South Carolina side. We talked about Malaysia Fawali, who is absolutely electric, right? So, again, we talk about those similar styles. I think, just like you said, with a coaching standpoint, I'm going right back to what I said in the matchup with Stanford and North Carolina State. It's definitely going to be a chess match because Wes Moore, he has done in the past 2 games an incredible job in maintaining the leads that he's had in these games, when we know that sometimes Wes Moore can kind of jump the gun and maybe overthink and then have a situation where the opponent goes on a big run and he doesn't know how to sustain that run, and they end up losing the game. So the past 2 games, he's done an incredible job of that. And I think that this is obviously a huge matchup for him. Being in the Final Four is going to be a little bit different. And Don Staley, again, on the other side, we've seen South Carolina kind of allow those teams to come back in the game by using the 3-point shot. And we know that Don Staley has been very, very intentional about 3-point defense. They lead the nation in 3-point defense in these past 2 games. They've allowed just about 50% from 3 for their opponent. So as far as the strategy as a coach, right, what do you think the first thing that needs to happen in order for South Carolina to gain the advantage early?
I think they got to protect the paint, because from my experience in the Final Four, you're playing the most games that you can possibly play, right? And so after preseason, after the non-conference and the conference, like in those games, you don't have the legs that you had in the rest of the season, right? So the experienced coaches like a West, right, is going to tell his players to penetrate the paint, get a high percentage shot. You know what I mean? Get right at the rim, put pressure on the referees to make calls, get people in foul trouble early. Like that's a great strategy, right? And I'm sure that's what Wes is telling his players. So I think Dawn, she has to protect the paint, contest the 3, but protect the paint, because people's legs aren't there to make shots for 3s unless you're like a Caitlin Clark and that's what you do. You know what I mean? Like, right. That's like a layup for you, right? But other than her and players that shoot it from deep, legs come into play in the Final Four. Fatigue comes into play, and that's where mental toughness kicks in. So I really like the mental toughness of both of these teams, because Wes, he's hard on his players, and Dawn is hard on her players, right? And so they the only thing I talked about this earlier this week. South Carolina being undefeated makes me a little bit nervous. I'm proud of them for being undefeated. It's hard to go this long undefeated. But last year, when they got their first loss, they went home. You know what I mean? Like, I want to get that out the way earlier in the season where you live to fight another day, right? And so it's hard when you're undefeated, KDot, because there's an X on your back. You know, you just live, you're paranoid, you know, you don't want it to end, and it's just a lot of pressure, right? And so West actually has no pressure. The NC State, they're the team, like, people were expecting Iowa to win it this year. They're the only team that's beat South Carolina last year. South Carolina's expected to win it this year. You know what I mean? Gino's done it so many times that you can't count him out, even though he doesn't have a deep bench. But NC State is the one that's like really the Cinderella team of this tournament. Like, they have no pressure, and that's such a great space to be in mentally, because it's like, hey, we're just gonna give it all we got. Nobody's expecting us to be here, and you got nothing to lose, you know. So I like the position that NC State is in, but I think South Carolina, they got a chip on their shoulder. They got unfinished business from last year. Dawn is a winner. She hates to lose. She hates. And so you got to know her team has her personality, because she's recruiting people with her personality type, because then she'll know how to motivate them, right? I was saying the other day, I was recruiting next to Dawn one year, and I was like, Dawn, you need to check out this point guard. She was like, she's not a knucklehead. I don't want her. I was like, knucklehead? She was like, yeah, I was a knucklehead. So I recruit knuckleheads because I know how to motivate them, and I know I can get on them hard and they won't transfer. And she left. She left the court. And I was like, oh, maybe I should be looking for knuckleheads. But when I thought about it, like, that's not my personality. You know what I mean? Like, I'm looking for kids that's gonna help me sleep good at night, right? And so they have her personality. This is not a team she's inherited now. She's been there so long. Like, they have her characteristics. Like, they're winners. They're gonna try to eat their cereal faster than the other person. So they're gonna use last year. That was like a dagger in their heart and twisting it, and they use that for fuel to get where they are right now. So it's going to be interesting. I can't wait. I don't have tickets for the games, nor do I want tickets for the games. I'm going to be at the watch parties. We're having a viewing party on Saturday for the men's basketball games. But I want to be at the viewing parties. Like, I want to be there with music, surrounded by my friends. We're screaming at the TV. We got good food. You know, we're dancing in between the timeouts, but we can hear what the commentators are saying when they're interviewing the coaches at the end of the game. Like, that's when they're interviewing the players after they cut the nets. I want to hear all of that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I will be watching from a viewing party.
Absolutely. Oh, shout out to Meta World Peace, aka Ron, our test fan, saying that Sylvia Crawley is a legend. We got it. So let's talk about the X factors. I think we do have a little bit of X factors in this game, and it really doesn't have to be a player. It could be a moment in the game. It could be, coaching strategy. I think for me, one of the biggest X factors in this game is what we talked about earlier, and that's 3-point defense. I've seen in the past couple games where Isaiah James, Sanaya Rivers, and they've just shot lights out from the perimeter, especially Isaiah James, and she has shown so much, I would say, maturity throughout the season, and I'm so proud of her, because I was a huge fan of her early in the season as well. But from an X factor standpoint on the South Carolina side, I really think that the defense from the 3-point line is very important. I've seen in some cases where they would go under the screen and they would kind of play drop coverage to protect Camilla from having to play too much of perimeter defense off the switches. So one of my biggest X factors for South Carolina is, of course, making sure that North Carolina State doesn't get the adequate 3-point shooting, the open 3-point shots that we had seen versus Indiana. versus Oregon State. And then on the North Carolina State side, find those open threes by using the screens properly, maybe going into some I guess some staggered type screens, doing some fades, things like that, so that they can confuse South Carolina on whether you play drop coverage or whether you switch in that regard. So what do you think are some of your X factors, whether it be a player or whether it be just strategies of the game that would help get either of these teams above the hump in winning to get to the national championship?
I don't know if they'll be adding any new plays and stagger screens. I mean, they're just going to kind of pull out their repertoire of what they have already to suit the team that they're playing against. Both of these teams that I know from a coaching standpoint, they like to focus on what they want to do well. Like they don't really focus on what the other team is doing, how to stop them. That was Gino. When I watched the UConn game, they really did a great job at the scouting report. The players, I mean, the coaches had a great scouting report, but the players, they knew personnel. They knew who to play off of. They knew who to, crowd. So I feel like with NC State and South Carolina, the X factor for NC State, I think, is going to have to be Wes. He's really going to have to really, really coach, and he's a great coach. So I feel confident that he's going to do that. For South Carolina, I think it's such a big moment. You know what I mean? So if they can just keep their poise, and just deflate the pressure, like it's a lot of pressure. And like I said, NC State has no pressure. They have a lot of pressure. So if they could just kind of stay calm for the first 2 minutes, I think if they can jump on them early, then it would be good for South Carolina. But if it's going back and forth and it's a scrappy game, NC State, they are notorious for that over the years, not just this team. If they can make it a messy, grimy game, they can stay in it. So I think the key for South Carolina is to just stay poised, just downplay all the hype and pressure, stay calm, and just execute and do what they do. I like Watkins. I mean Watkins. I think she's the X factor. When she shows up and dominates, and she can, when she does that, and I think there's still more in her. I don't even think I recruited that kid. She hadn't even scratched the surface. She's going to be a much better pro than college player, I think, because there's another level for her. And so I'm hoping that sometimes it just comes out in the tournament. You're like, where did that come from? So
absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, Vic. There's my GM right there. Best GM country.
Yeah, and for those who are listening, those who are watching, this is my main man, Vic Jones. He is very, very prominent in the AAU space and in the business of basketball space. Make sure you guys follow him. I call him my resident assistant professor when we do jump ball and study hall. He has been such an incredible blessing, an incredible brother to myself since way back in 2020. And we're just talking about the Final Four, Vic. Obviously, we're talking about the first game, South Carolina versus NC State. Why don't you give your analysis and some of your X factors before we move on to the second game?
You mean just as far as the Final Four, I think this is an unexpected Final Four for a lot of people. I think we kind of saw potentially Iowa being there and South Carolina, as early in the season, of course, no, but as the season went along, we know everybody was like, okay, they're definitely going to be in the Final Four. I think North Carolina State has been surprising people all season. They started out, I think they were picked to finish, 6th in ACC or something like that. And eighth. So, they had a little brief dip, a little lull in the middle of the season, and then they found their footing again right before the ACC tournament. It just kind of took off after that. So I told, I was telling my man, I was like, Sanaya Rivers is coming to play. I think she got something she want to prove against us. And having inside information from South Carolina and everything like that, I know her fellow classmates got this game circled too. And I'm not saying from they hate her, they don't like her. I think it's just a point of like, oh, word, I see you. Now we about to really lace it up. And it just because I think, like Dawn says religiously, she said these girls are hyper competitive. Like they hate to lose. And so I can see them being like, because I put it like this, just like they saw how they struggled with North Carolina early in the year. Like, and I know, I'm sorry, Sylvia, but I feel like they circled that game against UNC was like, we want to reestablish, particularly Malaysia. Like, I want people to know that that game was an aberration and this is who I am today. And so I can see North Carolina State being a game where they're ready to go. Matter of fact, I think they're already in Cleveland. I think they're in Cleveland right now. So, UConn, I'm not surprised they're there, because Paige is really that good. And they finally have a couple other players other than Aaliyah Edwards that have stepped up in the tournament. I can't think of the young lady's name, but she's been averaging like 15, 16 points a game. The point guard has been playing well.
KK Arnold.
Yeah. So they still got a thin team. It's still very thin, but who they have they're playing at a higher level and a better level than they were early in the season. And the crazy part is they're still 33-5. Like right. I'm like, damn, they 33-5. Like you think they lost 10 games, but it's just that standard that they have to live up to. And Iowa, man, they put on a clinic last night. I think it was a bad defensive scheme that Mulkey Gate put up against them. Like I just felt like that defensive scheme. People like, well, what would you have done? I said, man, I'd have thrown in a 3-2. I'd have mixed in a box and one here and there, and I'd have put Flage at the top of the 3-2 and let her kind of like be that defensive presence. And then occasionally when I go man, I'll put Flage on. But and I also felt like they should have ran the ball through Michaela and Flage and I can't remember her name, the young lady from DePaul. I feel like they should have. Yeah, Nisa. I think the offense should have ran through them instead of feeding the ball to Reese. I just don't feel like her offensive skill set. I think they would have did better, like just giving the ball to Anissa more in the post and telling Angel like rebound, play defense, get putbacks, things like that. And I think their offense would have been a lot more efficient. Because the biggest difference in that game last night versus last year is the guard play and 3-point shooting. They just didn't have the 3-point shooting they had in the championship game last year versus, 9 3-pointers from Caitlin Clark, who's an amazing player. But yeah, I think it's an exciting Final Four. I think the viewership came out tonight, said 12.3 million viewers.
Absolutely, 12.3
surpassed. Was like 9.8, 9.3 last year, something like that.
It was about 9.8, 9.9 last year.
Yeah. So that's, Sylvia, I've been a big fan of the women's game for years. And I be telling people like, bro, they didn't just start playing great basketball. Like they've been playing basketball for a couple of decades now, if not more. And I'm like, people just haven't watched and you haven't checked in. And now, I'm glad the casual, like you said, the casuals have arrived. And, so I have to be like, I just be quiet for the most part. I'm like, they going to talk like it's new, but, I'm happy that the women's game is finally getting the just due. And so, that's my take on the Final Four. But I think it's going to be a really good 2 games this weekend. I'll be in Chicago working some AAU camps, but I will have my iPad in my hand with the game playing while I'm scouting the high school game stuff.
I agree with Vic. Like it's been women's basketball been here. It's been good.
Absolutely.
I mean, I just think the U.S. is just now catching up with the rest of the world. The rest of the world been giving us our flowers, been compensating us for the game that we play.
Absolutely.
Right? Packing out stadiums over there. This is why we played overseas so much, because we felt that love over there. And so I'm just happy that, and I think it took COVID to slow us down, slow the U.S. down, make us tune in, tap in.
That part.
A series of events has led to this moment, right? From just the players taking a stand during the anthem and the league backing them, right? And it was during the Kaepernick Kaepernick kind of movement. So the NBA guys kind of came and big brothers came and protected them. Then you had a documentary that went out while they were in the bubble. That drew attention to women's basketball, right?
Shout out to Chennai in 144. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you had Brittany Griner in Russia, right? So now for the first time, somebody knew a women's basketball player's name besides Lisa Leslie. And it was, Brittany Griner, unfortunate circumstances. And so there's been a lot of things happening to like bring us to this moment with women's basketball. And then with the college game, I think it's NILs that's helped this moment because now players are making themselves marketable. Like you look on their social media pages and they all want to be a model now. They all got the lashes and the hair all the way up, but they're trying to make themselves marketable. So now people are finding out their human interest stories. They rap, they sing, they got a clothing line, they got a foundation, but women's basketball players been at a side hobby, hustle, business, whatever you want to call it. I've been sewing since I was 12. Charlotte Smith been playing the piano since before she got to Carolina, right?
Talk about it.
Fran Harris got Netflix movies, but that didn't just pop out of Fran, like she's been doing that. So now I think with NILs, you get to see, their marketable side. They're letting that show now. And I think just with the whole transfer portals, now you can build franchises. Like players can recruit each other and say, hey, let's win a championship. So, and now they're trash talking, but they've been trash talking. It's just more televised now, right? Now we got social media where now you can screenshot that trash talk or doing this or whatever they're doing. And now, everybody can see it. So it's just more visible, but it's been going on for a long time. And this is the day we've been praying for. We've been praying for this moment right now as pioneers. We didn't know if the league would last very long, right? People who fought for Title IX so that women can have scholarships, this is the day that we've prayed for. So when I go to North Carolina and I see people in the nosebleed section, I'm like, wow, yes. I go in the locker room, I'm like, yes, And so yeah, women's basketball is when I turned on the TV this morning and saw Shannon Sharp and Steve Steven and, like just commentators in a row, 4 of them, talking about women's basketball for a while. It wasn't just kind of like a quick play of the day. No, they sat there for a moment. They knew names of players and stuff. I was like, oh, yeah, Dad, we hear that. My dad loves women's basketball. He's like Vic. He's a women's basketball fan.
And also, I think other things that played a role in us getting here was Sabrina Ionescu exposing that weight room situation and that going viral because she was such a big name. And, she was the Caitlin Clark at the time in college basketball. That was a big deal. And
don't forget about her and what she's
doing.
Oh yeah. And actually, and just quick, it was I believe that was Sedona Prince because Sabrina was already.
Oh yeah.
It was Sedona Prince.
Bad.
No worries. But
don't forget Maya Moore sitting out a year.
Yeah.
Yep. And what she did.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
So that brought just national attention. So there's been a series of things that led and the country's ready. We're ready for what's happening right now.
And I'll be remiss if I didn't say at least we're talking about like how we all met. Like we got to give a shout out to Clubhouse during COVID, right? And the reason why I want to give a shout out to Clubhouse is because there has been a renaissance of women's basketball enthusiasts who have been entrenched in the game for such a long time, but didn't know each other because we had our own separate lives. But Clubhouse brought us all together, and we literally created Voltron. And that's, in my opinion, part of why we see the renaissance of women's basketball today. Because if it wasn't for groups like the committee, if it wasn't for groups like No Cap Space, if it wasn't for groups like the 9450, if it wasn't for groups like We Are Sports, if it wasn't for these type of groups that came together during the pandemic and kept those lights on, even though we were all stuck in the house and we were kind of going and blowing our minds out because we had nothing to do, that brought us together, and that created the conversations, and that created the visibility, the heightened visibility, and that created the space saying, you know what? If the mainstream media isn't going to do it, Why don't we do it? And why don't we force the mainstream media to? And I'm gonna be straight up honest with you. The mainstream media has basically taken our content, taken all of our information, and basically created it as theirs. And hey, it is what it is, but this is the result. And I just want to thank Clubhouse for that. I want to thank Twitter Spaces for that. I want to thank IG Live for that. Because if it wasn't for that in the whole pandemic, I don't think I really personally don't think it would be as live as it is now, even though it would still be growing as we see it grow.
Yeah, and I feel like if that's the sacrifice to get this game, the women's game, where it is today, is worth it. Because, like I said, and Sylvia, you co-signed, women's game been popping, bro.
Absolutely.
Like I tell y'all all the time, my first time turning on the TV just randomly one weekend, and I see Dawn Staley coming up the court, hair flying, ball, like intensity on her face, and I'm like, yo, who is this? You know what I'm saying? And Tammy Reese over here, and the twins. I'm like, and I had been hearing about, the USC Trojans with Cheryl Miller from my older brother. He used to talk about the lady texters. Like he watched the game too. Like my older brother lives in Charlotte. Like he was like, bro, like I was glued to the TV because he was like, I just love hoop. And if you a woman or a man and you hoop, I'm gonna watch you. And he was like, the lady texters, the USC Trojans. He even talked about the Cheney State team that played in the
Shout out to Cheney State, yeah.
Yeah, he talked about them. I think what's her name that plays for the Liberty? Her mom was at Cheney State at the time.
Yep, Benaj Laney.
Benaj Laney, yeah. So, I've been, and then like my hometown, the ladies hoop too. The women hoop too. They hooping with us. Like I tell people, like when we was in high school, how people typically show up for the men's game, the boys' game. If you showed up for the boys' game thinking you was about to get in that gym, you tripping because the game's already packed out to go see the girls play. Because they were state championship. They had ballers. And so we just love hoop. And if you could hoop, we had hoopers come through our hometown. They didn't get pushed like they should have. Like we had ladies that should have been in college and potentially, done something overseas. But small town in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina, people really didn't care. The locals didn't push them like that. And over the last few years, we've been sending young ladies to college. But I just grew up around hoopers. And if you're a hoop, I'm a hoop. You know what I'm saying? So the women always could hoop. Even with Cheryl and everybody, Cheryl at Texas Tech, I'm like, how y'all, they been hooping, dog. Like, what y'all talking about? They been hooping. You know what I'm saying? So, what Kat says, I'm hoping that people reverse engineer and go back and check out the Cheryl Swoops, the Sylvia Crawleys, and Charlotte Smith. Because I remember when Charlotte hitting that three, which was huge. Did she dunk in a game?
She did against A&T.
I thought so. So, you know what I'm saying? So, like,
Second
like.
in NCAA to dunk.
Yeah. So, my bad. So yeah, man. So like at the end of the day, man, like I just love the game of basketball. Like my little girl sees me watching basketball all the time, but she know I love my Lady Gamecock. Well, like Don said, not Lady Gamecock, Gamecocks women's basketball.
Right, that part.
And yeah.
And we forgot to mention fantasy women's basketball.
Absolutely.
You had fantasy football for years. You had NBA. But we all three of us tapped into fantasy women's basketball.
Yeah.
And I had the Bull City Blazers, the world champion Bull City Blazers. KDot, you were the commissioner.
Absolutely.
That league, I will say that league really helped people learn more about women's basketball.
Yeah.
Fantasy league, you got to know those players. You got to know their stats. You got to learn how to put those teams together. Like Vic is the guru at fantasy sports. I'm talking all sports, not just women's basketball, like all sports. He needs to like commentate for ESPN, but like I had to stay on top of it. Like I had to stay on top of the games, who scored what. Then our score came out and it was like 135 to 64, and I was like, wait, how can we have 135 points? It's like it's total up all the people on our team, So that really helps educate. Like as we tap more into that, and all this gambling that's coming back to the
I was about
game.
to say gambling is going to be big.
I think that's a can
Huge,
of worms they don't have a lid for, but you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
it's about money, and if they want
Yeah.
that money, they're gonna open up that lid, and then they're gonna worry about the rest later that they didn't think through. So
Yep.
And before we go, and I know Vic gave us a little preview on Iowa, UConn, but I do want to get some predictions. I won't be a great host if I didn't ask for predictions, right? So let's start with Coach Crawley span. So what do you think? Who do you think is coming out of the Final Four, and then ultimately who is your national champion?
I think Iowa's going to come out of the Iowa UConn game. I just don't think UConn is deep enough, and I think Iowa, like they never really blow out a team. You know what I mean? Like it's always great games, and so throughout the course of the season, they've learned how to win a game. They learn how to come from behind and win the game. Like they've had so many different circumstances that I think have prepared them for this moment. And then Caitlin, she's got ice in her veins. You know what I mean? Like she's just gonna be steady, calm, distributing the ball. I've never seen a player who had a scorer's mentality that loved to pass too. So I'm saying Iowa is gonna come out of that game. I'm saying South Carolina is coming out of the other bracket, and you're gonna see Iowa and South Carolina in the final game.
Okay, what about you, Vic?
Same thing. I think the issue with UConn, as great as their run has been lately, they just don't have the depth, and that system that Caitlin runs, that system is perfect for her. Those players is like those girls have seconds, like they're all mentally connected. And they just know, like, if I stay here or if I run to this spot, she gonna find me. If I run this team and Caitlin has the ball, her pass ahead is the best I've seen since Diana Taurasi. Might be better, honestly, because she throws the passes before they even see it.
And she hits them where they're going.
Yeah.
Every time.
Dimes.
It's like a quarterback throwing a pass. They throw to a spot, and the receiver, by the time the receiver gets to that spot, the ball's there. That's her. It's crazy because like she had 41 last night and 12 assists.
Yeah.
And you're like, so that system, she is that system, but it fits her skill set perfectly. So I think they just gonna be a little bit too much for UConn. And not being a homer, but I just think South Carolina is locked in. They've been locked in since that little scare they had in the second round of the SEC, or the semifinals or whatever. They've been kind of locked in. And I think North Carolina State is just going to be South Carolina's going to be a little too much for them. I think they're going to make it a game though, because they're scrappy. They're really tough. So I think they'll make it a game. So I say South Carolina, Iowa in the finals.
All right. So I'm actually gonna go the opposite way, and I'm leaning towards UConn doing this crazy upset. And the reason why I'm leaning towards UConn is, as my thing is this: as long as UConn keeps up with Iowa, then from a half court standpoint, from a jumping the ball standpoint, I think UConn can pull it off. Aaliyah Edwards, in my opinion, is going to be the X factor against Hannah Stuckey. I know that they have a lot of great players on the Iowa side, and Kate Martin, and also Hannah Stuckey. But I think that from a standpoint that UConn has been battle tested all year long, and they've been playing 6 players from December, pretty much November, December to now. I think they're just all used to playing just 40 minutes. And I think Paige Becker's, this is going to be her redemption song. And I think they pull off an upset against Iowa. And then I have South Carolina on the other side. I think that Dawn Staley is going to have the ladies ready to roll, ready to rock. And it's going to be a little bit too much for North Carolina State. And with that being said, there goes our national championship game on Sunday, which will happen, I believe, at 3:00 on ABC. So make sure you guys check that out. I'll probably step away from asking who your national champions are. We'll let that simmer for a little while, since we still have an entire 2 or 3 days to talk about the Final Four national championship. But I do want to thank you both so much for tapping in with me. You guys are always amazing. We are the big three of fantasy basketball. I've always said that, and I appreciate you guys so much. So right now, Coach Crawley Span, Vic, starting with Coach Crawley, go ahead and shout out your socials. And again, give us, for those who missed it, Coach Crawley, give us another brief preview of what you got going on in Cleveland this weekend.
Oh, okay. So my IG is on the screen at Tall Girls United. My personal IG is at Coach Crawley. But we've got our Wellness, Wealth, and Winning Conference starting with our meet and greet on Thursday, brunch on Friday, fashion show on Saturday, and with an after party, with an after viewing party after the fashion show. And then Sunday, we have our FCA worship service where we are actually, one of our sponsors is the WNBA Chaplains, and they spearhead the FCA worship service, and that's followed by a free KDot breakfast. So we've got an action-packed week. We're just going to do some watch parties. We don't even have tickets for the game for the games. We're going to watch it together, but it's going to be a great time. We are height inclusive, so we welcome anyone to come and hang out with us. Just the models who are in the show are all 6 feet and up. All of our panelists are pretty much 6 feet and up, except for maybe Samika. So yeah, it's gonna be lit in Cleveland. There's a lunar eclipse that weekend, so downtown is bananas and crazy. Every hotel, everything is sold out.
Yeah, man. I love to hear it. Love to hear it. Vic, go ahead and shout yourself out.
Man, yeah, on Twitter and IG at Vic Jones 1914. As far as the recruiting stuff, I actually have a Twitter for that at Victor Jones GE for Go Educate. That's for the football, basketball recruiting. And yeah, man, we'll be in Chicago this weekend in Linwood, Illinois. Got a 12-court facility. I think we got like 130 teams that are going to be there. So if you're in Chicago and you want to see some good high school basketball, AAU circuit, come check us out. It's an independent circuit, non-shoe sponsor, but we have several D1 kids in the house. A lot of D1 kids, actually, like 30, 40 kids. And we're gonna be outside, man.
That's what's up. And as always, you all know where to follow me on Twitter at k.lu3h, IG k.lu3h, TikTok k.lu3h, and also follow Jump Ball and Study Hall on Twitter at jball, the letter N, Study Hall. Again, that's at jball, the letter N, Study Hall. And also follow the 9450 on Twitter at the 9450, on Instagram at the 9450 _, on TikTok the 9450 _, and on YouTube at the 9450. So without further ado, this has been Brackets and Buckets, the Final Four preview show, brought to you by J Ball and Study Hall and the 9450 Network. I am your host, Kevin K. Lewis, aka Professor Dot. I have my homies, Coach Sylvia Crawley Span, and my assistant professor, Vic Jones. Without further ado, this has been the show. Peace and blessings to everybody out there. We out of here. Peace.
Peace, Sylvia.